David Johnson stepped off the plane, his heart racing with a mix of excitement and apprehension. The air was thick with humidity, and the vibrant sounds of the bustling airport hit him like a wave. As he made his way through the crowded terminal, he couldn't shake the feeling that this trip would be different. He was here not just as a diplomat, but as a representative of his country, tasked with building bridges and fostering understanding. David was a man of dignified stature, with warm brown skin that contrasted with the crisp white shirt he wore. His polished shoes clicked against the tile floor, drawing the attention of several passers-by. He noted their curious glances, some filled with respect, and others tinged with skepticism. David had experienced this dance before. The subtle judgments made based on the color of his skin rather than the merit of his work. As he navigated through the airport, a young woman approached him, holding a sign that read David Johnson, Ambassador. She greeted him with a bright smile that briefly dispelled his worries. "Welcome, Mr. Johnson. I'm Emily, your liaison for this trip. We have a car waiting outside to take you to the hotel." "Thank you, Emily," he replied, appreciating her warmth. "I'm looking forward to getting started." The car ride to the hotel was filled with the sights of the city. Vibrant murals, street vendors selling colorful goods, and the aroma of local cuisine wafting through the open windows. Despite the beauty around him, David couldn't help but notice the unease lingering in the air, especially from the people they passed. He wondered how his presence would be received in this foreign land. After a quick check-in at the hotel, David unpacked his belongings and prepared for his first official meeting. He was scheduled to meet with key local leaders to discuss potential partnerships and collaborative efforts. As he glanced in the mirror, adjusting his tie, he reminded himself that he was here to represent not just his country, but also the values of inclusion and respect. As he stepped into the meeting room, David noticed the attendees were predominantly older white men, their expressions a mix of curiosity and skepticism. He took a deep breath and introduced himself, determined to break the ice. "Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Johnson, the new ambassador. I'm excited to discuss how we can work together to strengthen our ties." The room was silent for a moment before one of the men, a tall figure with a stern face, finally responded, "Thank you, Ambassador. We appreciate your visit." There was a subtle condescension in his tone, a hint that he might not fully recognize David's authority. David pressed on, presenting his ideas for collaboration in trade, education, and cultural exchange. He was passionate about fostering a relationship that honored both nations' histories and futures. As he spoke, he could sense a few of the men shifting in their seats, exchanging glances that spoke volumes about their perceptions. Despite the challenges, David managed to hold their attention. He concluded his presentation, confident that he had made a good first impression. But the lingering doubt about how he would be treated outside these walls began to creep in. Later that evening, feeling exhausted yet accomplished, David decided to unwind with a meal at a local restaurant. He hoped to immerse himself in the culture and enjoy the cuisine he had heard so much about. As he entered the establishment, the atmosphere was warm, filled with laughter and the enticing aroma of spices. He approached the hostess, a young woman with an indifferent expression. "Table for one, please," he said, offering a polite smile. She glanced at him, her eyes narrowing slightly before she motioned toward a table in the corner. "Over there," she said curtly, as if he were an afterthought rather than a valued guest. David felt a wave of disappointment wash over him, but he brushed it off. He took his seat, hoping the food would help lift his spirits. After a few minutes, a server approached, a young man with a smirk that made David uneasy. "What can I get you?" the server asked, his tone dismissive. "I'd like to start with the grilled fish and a side of vegetables, please," David replied, trying to keep his composure. The server raised an eyebrow, clearly unimpressed. "Sure, whatever," he muttered, jotting down the order before walking away without another word. As David waited for his meal, he couldn't shake the feeling of being an outsider. He scanned the room, noticing how the other patrons were treated, attentively and with respect. The contrast made his heart sink. He was not just another customer. He was here representing his country, yet it felt as though he were invisible. When his meal finally arrived, David tried to enjoy it, but the flavor was overshadowed by the server's lack of respect. Each bite felt like a reminder of the prejudice that still existed, even in the most mundane of settings. After finishing his meal, he signaled for the check, eager to leave the uncomfortable atmosphere behind. As he stood to leave, he overheard a group of patrons nearby laughing loudly. Their conversation was laced with jokes that referenced people like him, their mockery seeping into the air. David clenched his jaw, fighting the urge to confront them, but he reminded himself of his position. He was an ambassador, and his mission was to promote understanding, not escalate conflict. With a heavy heart, he exited the restaurant, the laughter still echoing in his ears. As he walked back to the hotel, David couldn't help but reflect on the challenges he would face in this new role. He was determined to show them who he was, not just as an ambassador, but as a person worthy of respect. The next morning, David awoke with a renewed sense of determination. He understood that his mission was not just about diplomacy, but also about confronting prejudice head-on. After a quick breakfast at the hotel, he prepared for a busy day of meetings. He knew that he would need to be sharp, ready to advocate for his country, while also addressing the underlying biases he had already encountered. By noon, David found himself in a bustling neighborhood known for its vibrant culture and local cuisine. He decided to take a break from his official meetings and experience the city's culinary delights firsthand. He had heard about a popular restaurant famed for its traditional dishes, and the idea of enjoying a hearty meal brought a sense of comfort amidst the uncertainty of his new role. As he approached the restaurant, the rich aroma of spices filled the air, mingling with the sounds of laughter and conversation. David felt a flicker of excitement as he pushed open the door, the bell above it chiming cheerfully. The interior was warm and inviting, adorned with colorful artwork that celebrated the local culture. "Welcome. How many?" the hostess asked, her voice bright, but her eyes scanning him with a hint of doubt. "Just one, please," David replied, maintaining a friendly demeanor. She gestured towards a table near the back, away from the main dining area. David noted the slight frown on her face, as if he were somehow less deserving of a prime spot. "You can sit there," she said curtly, leading him to the table. He nodded and took a seat, determined not to let the initial impression ruin his meal. As he settled in, David couldn't help but feel a sense of unease. The restaurant was bustling with patrons, most of whom were enjoying their meals and each other's company. Yet he sensed an underlying tension, as if he were an intruder in a space that wasn't entirely welcoming. He glanced around, noticing how the other guests were being treated with an extra layer of warmth. The waitstaff laughed and engaged with them, while he felt invisible. A young waitress approached him shortly after, her smile forced. "What can I get you?" she asked, her tone lacking the enthusiasm he had hoped for. "I'd like the grilled chicken with a side of the house salad, please," David replied, trying to sound upbeat. "Sure thing," she said, jotting down the order without making eye contact. As she walked away, David couldn't shake the feeling that he was being judged, and it wasn't just about his choice of meal. Moments later, as he waited for his food, David pulled out his phone to review some notes for his upcoming meetings. He was engrossed in his thoughts when he overheard a group of men at the next table. Their laughter echoed loudly, and he felt the weight of their words wash over him. "Did you see that guy?" one of them joked, pointing in David's direction. "What's he doing here? Looks like he wandered in from the wrong neighborhood." David's heart sank. He could feel the heat rising in his cheeks, a mixture of embarrassment and anger. It was one thing to experience microaggressions. It was another to hear them spoken so openly. He glanced up, catching their eye, but they simply laughed, unfazed by the discomfort they were causing. The waitress returned with his meal, placing the plate down in front of him with a hint of hesitation. "Enjoy," she said, but her voice lacked sincerity. David nodded, forcing himself to focus on the food rather than the hurtful comments he had just overheard. He took a deep breath and cut into the chicken, trying to appreciate the flavors, but it felt tasteless compared to the bitter reality of the moment. As he chewed, he noticed the same men continuing their conversation, their jokes increasingly derogatory and loud. Each word felt like a stab, and he struggled to remain composed. "Some people just don't know their place," one of the men said, causing the others to roar with laughter. David could no longer sit silently. He had to say something, not just for himself, but for all those who had endured similar slights. With determination building inside him, David stood up and approached their table, his heart pounding. "Excuse me," he said, his voice steady yet firm. "I couldn't help but overhear your conversation. I'm David Johnson, the new ambassador here." The laughter faded, replaced by stunned silence. The men exchanged glances, unsure of how to respond. "I understand that we may come from different backgrounds," David continued, "but making jokes at the expense of others only perpetuates ignorance. It's important to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their appearance or where they come from." One of the men, a stout fellow with a bristly beard, finally spoke up. "Hey, man, we were just joking. No harm intended." David shook his head, frustration rising. "It may seem like a joke to you, but for many, it's a painful reality. I hope you can understand that your words carry weight." The group shifted uncomfortably in their seats, and David felt a small sense of satisfaction that he had spoken up. But before he could say more, the waitress appeared, clearly uncomfortable with the tension. "Can I get you anything else?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "No, thank you," David replied, turning his back to the men and returning to his table. As he sat down, he could feel their eyes on him, and he knew he had made a stand, albeit an uncomfortable one. As David finished his meal, he reflected on the encounter. He realized that speaking out was just the beginning. He had to use his position to advocate for change, not only in the diplomatic arena, but also in the everyday lives of people. After paying his bill, David left the restaurant, determined to carry that moment into the future. He walked back to his hotel, contemplating how to navigate this complex new world. His resolve solidified. He would not allow himself to be underestimated. With each step, he could feel the weight of the day's events pressing on his shoulders, but he also felt a spark of hope. Change wouldn't come easy, but he was ready to fight for it. The next day was filled with anticipation as David prepared for a series of important meetings with government officials. The air in his hotel room buzzed with a mix of excitement and anxiety. He meticulously went over his notes, ensuring he was ready to address not only bilateral agreements, but also the underlying tensions he had begun to perceive in the social fabric of the host country. After a quick breakfast, David dressed in a sharp navy suit, adjusting his tie in the mirror before heading out. He wanted to project confidence, especially after the unsettling experience at the restaurant. As he walked to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, he noticed how the streets were teeming with life. Vendors calling out, children laughing, and the hustle and bustle of daily routines. Despite the vibrancy around him, he felt the weight of his responsibilities settle on his shoulders. Upon arrival, He was greeted warmly by his counterpart, Maria, the Deputy Foreign Minister. "Welcome, Ambassador Johnson. We're thrilled to have you here," she said, her smile genuine. "Thank you, Maria. I appreciate your hospitality," David replied, shaking her hand firmly. He was eager to build rapport with her, understanding that a strong partnership could lead to greater understanding between their nations. As they entered the conference room, David took a moment to appreciate the ornate decor, intricate woodwork, large windows letting in natural light, and a long table where several officials were already seated. He recognized some faces from previous meetings and felt a mix of familiarity and apprehension. Once seated, the discussions began. Topics ranged from trade agreements to cultural exchanges, each point more crucial than the last. David contributed thoughtfully, emphasizing the importance of fostering mutual respect and understanding. As the meeting progressed, he noticed a few officials glancing at him with skepticism. It was a subtle reminder of the prejudice that still lingered beneath the surface. "Let's move on to addressing the recent events surrounding the ambassador's visit," Maria said, her tone shifting to a more serious note. "We understand there was an unfortunate incident during your lunch at the restaurant." David felt his heart race as he prepared to discuss it. "Yes, there were some uncomfortable moments," he said, choosing his words carefully. "It's important for me to express that such incidents reflect deeper societal issues that we must address. Diplomacy goes beyond agreements. It requires understanding and respect among all individuals, regardless of their background." The room fell silent. He could see a few officials exchanging wary looks, as if they were grappling with the reality of the conversation. "We can't shy away from these discussions," David continued, his voice gaining strength. "It's vital that we work towards a society where everyone feels valued and included. While we strive for progress, there are cultural differences we must navigate," one official interjected, a middle-aged man with silver hair. "Not everyone understands the impact of their words." David nodded, acknowledging the point. "True, but education is key. It starts with conversations like this. If we can't address our biases, how can we expect to foster international cooperation?" As the discussions unfolded, David felt a shift in the atmosphere. The officials began to engage more openly, asking questions and sharing their own experiences. The dialogue took on a more personal tone, highlighting the struggles they face within their own society. He realized that they were starting to see him not just as an ambassador, but as someone who shared their concerns. After hours of constructive dialogue, Maria concluded the meeting with a sense of optimism. "Thank you all for your candid contributions today. Let's continue to work together, not just on diplomatic fronts, but on creating a more inclusive environment within our own communities." As the meeting adjourned, David felt a surge of hope. He had entered the room feeling like an outsider, but left with a sense of belonging. The officials approached him one by one, expressing their appreciation for his honesty and insights. Even the skeptical ones seemed to reconsider their perceptions. Later that evening, David joined Maria for dinner at a local restaurant, a different one this time. He appreciated the opportunity to continue their discussions in a more relaxed setting. As they shared a meal, he couldn't help but feel a budding friendship forming. "David, I want to thank you for your openness today," Maria said, taking a sip of her drink. "It's not easy to confront these issues, especially in a political environment. Your perspective is refreshing." "Thank you, Maria. It's important to me that we address these challenges together," David replied, grateful for her support. "It's easy to overlook these matters when we're caught up in formalities, but they impact real lives." Their conversation flowed easily, covering everything from their shared interest in art to their hopes for a better future for their nations. David felt at ease, momentarily forgetting the difficulties he faced as a diplomat. As the evening came to a close, David walked back to his hotel, feeling lighter than he had in days. The warmth of the day's discussions lingered with him, fueling his resolve to keep advocating for change. He understood that it wouldn't be an easy path, but he was prepared to face the challenges ahead. In the days that followed, David dedicated himself to building connections within the community. He attended cultural events, met with local leaders, and engaged with citizens. Each encounter reinforced his belief that fostering understanding was essential for lasting change. One afternoon, while visiting a community center, David met a group of young activists who were passionate about social justice. They shared stories of their experiences with discrimination and their dreams for a more equitable future. Listening to them, he felt a deep sense of responsibility to amplify their voices. "Your passion is inspiring," David said, encouraging them. "I want to support your efforts. We can work together to create a platform for change." As the weeks went by, David's presence in the community grew, and he became a familiar face at various events. People began to recognize him not just as an ambassador, but as an advocate for their struggles. Each interaction deepened his commitment to building bridges and addressing the challenges posed by prejudice and discrimination. The initial incident at the restaurant, which had felt like a setback, transformed into a catalyst for positive change. David understood that his role extended far beyond traditional diplomacy. He was part of a larger movement for justice and equality. As David continued to immerse himself in the local community, the momentum he had gained felt fragile yet invigorating. Every connection he made seemed to resonate with a deeper understanding of the complexities that shaped their interactions. However, beneath this growing camaraderie, he sensed an undercurrent of tension brewing between the U.S. and the host country. One evening, after attending a town hall meeting, David received a call from Maria. "David, we need to meet. There's been a development that could escalate the situation," she said, her tone serious. "Of course, I'll be right there," David replied, quickly gathering his things. Arriving at Maria's office, he noticed the unease etched on her face. "What's happened?" he asked, taking his seat. "There's been a protest planned against your visit. Some groups are unhappy with the way the U.S. has handled recent diplomatic issues," Maria explained, her voice tight with concern. "They're demanding a public apology for your incident at the restaurant, which they believe reflects a larger systemic issue." David leaned back, processing her words. "I expected there might be some backlash, but this feels different. What do they want from us?" "They're asking for a formal acknowledgement of the incident, plus assurances that the government will address the discrimination issues in the hospitality sector," Maria said. "It's a delicate situation, and we need to respond carefully." "Have they reached out to the embassy?" David inquired. "They have, but they're not satisfied with the initial responses. They want to feel heard, and it's crucial we manage this before it spirals out of control." David rubbed his temples, feeling the weight of the situation. "We can't afford to let this escalate. Perhaps we should hold a press conference to address their concerns directly and openly." Maria's eyes widened slightly. "That's a bold move, David. It could backfire if we don't handle it right. But it might also be a chance to show that we're committed to fostering dialogue." "Exactly," David replied, determination settling in. "We can't shy away from this. If we address the issues head-on, it might build trust. But we need to approach it as a collaborative effort, not a reprimand." The two spent hours strategizing, drafting potential statements, and discussing how to convey the seriousness of the issue while remaining respectful to the local culture. They decided that the press conference would emphasize the U.S. commitment to equity and understanding, as well as acknowledge the incident's impact on the community. As the day of the press conference approached, David felt a mix of apprehension and excitement. He knew that this moment could be pivotal, not just for his diplomatic mission, but for the local community he had come to care about deeply. On the morning of the conference, the atmosphere was electric. Reporters filled the room, their cameras flashing as David and Maria took the stage. He took a deep breath, looking out at the sea of faces. He could sense the skepticism and hope intertwined in the audience. Thank you all for being here today, David began, his voice steady. We are here to address an unfortunate incident that occurred during my recent visit. I want to express my sincerest apologies for the misunderstanding and the feelings it has caused within the community. The reporters shifted in their seats, eager for his next words. This incident is not just about me. It symbolizes a larger issue of bias and discrimination that affects many individuals in our society. We must confront these challenges together. As he spoke, David's words resonated with the audience, and he saw some nodding in agreement. The United States is committed to fostering respect and understanding between our nations. We acknowledge the need for ongoing dialogue to ensure that everyone, regardless of their background, feels valued and respected. After his initial statement, David opened the floor for questions. A reporter from a local newspaper stood up, a mix of skepticism and hope in her voice. Ambassador, how can you assure us that these words will translate into action? We've seen apologies before, but real change is what we need. David smiled, grateful for the question. You're absolutely right. Words alone are not enough. We are already working with community leaders to develop initiatives aimed at addressing discrimination in various sectors, including hospitality. I believe in accountability, and I'm committed to ensuring that we follow through on these promises. The tension in the room began to ease as David engaged with the reporters. He listened to their concerns and offered insights into how they could work together for change. He could feel the audience shifting from skepticism to cautious optimism, and it filled him with hope. As the conference wrapped up, David felt a sense of accomplishment. He had taken a step toward addressing the issues head-on, and while he knew it was only the beginning, he felt a collective resolve growing in the community. The following days were filled with both support and criticism. Social media buzzed with reactions, and David was pleasantly surprised by the outpouring of encouragement from citizens who had attended the press conference. Many expressed their gratitude for his honesty and willingness to confront difficult topics. However, there were also voices of dissent. Some accused him of attempting to sugarcoat the issues rather than addressing the root causes. David understood that not everyone would be satisfied, and he reminded himself that change was a gradual process. Determined to keep the momentum going, David organized a series of community workshops focused on promoting cultural awareness and understanding. He invited local leaders, activists, and citizens to participate, hoping to create a platform for meaningful dialogue. As the first workshop approached, David felt a mix of nerves and excitement. He wanted to ensure that these sessions provided a safe space for everyone to share their experiences. He believed that understanding each other's stories could pave the way for change. On the day of the workshop, David arrived early to set up. He was greeted by a diverse group of participants, each eager to engage in conversation. The energy in the room was palpable as people exchanged greetings and shared their expectations for the session. "Welcome, everyone," David said, stepping to the front. "Thank you for being here today. I believe that by sharing our experiences, we can foster understanding and create a stronger community together." As the discussions unfolded, David felt the walls of skepticism begin to crumble. Participants shared their personal stories, their frustrations, and their hopes. The dialogue was raw and honest, and David listened intently, taking notes on key points to address in future initiatives. The workshop proved to be a success, and David felt invigorated by the conversations. It became clear to him that the journey toward healing and understanding was just beginning. Yet, with each discussion, he was confident that they were moving in the right direction. Following the success of the first workshop, David felt an energized commitment to fostering dialogue between the U.S. and the local community. The positive feedback was uplifting, but he was aware that sustaining this momentum required ongoing effort. He knew he needed to deepen the engagement by involving various community groups, from youth organizations to local businesses. One morning, as David sipped his coffee, he reflected on the previous week's workshop. He had learned so much from the participants, stories that were heartbreaking yet inspiring. Determined to build on that foundation, he decided to host a series of workshops, each tailored to address specific community needs. "Maria," David said, stepping into her office, "I'd like to organize more workshops, focusing on different groups within the community. We need to ensure that everyone feels included in this dialogue." Maria looked intrigued. "That sounds promising. What groups do you have in mind?" "I'm thinking of collaborating with local schools, business owners, and even the youth organizations. We could facilitate discussions about their experiences and how we can work together for real change," David replied, excitement building in his voice. "That's a solid plan, David. I can help reach out to some of the organizations," Maria said, already jotting down notes. "But remember, we need to ensure that these workshops are not just talk. They should lead to actionable steps." David nodded, appreciating her insight. "Absolutely. I want to create an environment where everyone feels comfortable sharing, but also where we can identify concrete solutions to the issues we discuss." As they strategized, David realized that they needed to set clear objectives for each workshop. He envisioned them as not just discussions, but as collaborative problem-solving sessions. They would culminate in action plans that the community could implement together. Over the next few weeks, the workshops began to take shape. David and Maria coordinated with various organizations, crafting invitations that emphasized the importance of each voice in the dialogue. The excitement within the community began to grow as word spread about the upcoming events. Finally, the first of the new series was set to take place at a local high school. David arrived early, eager to greet the students and staff who would participate. As he walked through the halls, he was reminded of his own high school days, the hopes, dreams, and challenges that shaped his youth. When the time came, students filled the auditorium, buzzing with energy. David stood at the front, watching as a diverse group of teenagers settled into their seats. He sensed a mix of curiosity and apprehension, and he knew he had to create a welcoming atmosphere. "Hey everyone, I'm David, your ambassador, and I'm here because I want to hear your stories," he began, a warm smile on his face. "This is your chance to share your experiences, and together, we can explore ways to make our community stronger." The students exchanged glances, some smiling back, while others appeared more reserved. But as David opened the floor for discussion, one student raised her hand, her voice steady. "What if we feel like we can't really change anything?" "That's a great question," David replied, appreciating her honesty. "Change often starts small with conversations like this. By talking about our experiences, we can find common ground and work together toward solutions." Encouraged by his response, more students began to share their thoughts. They spoke about issues ranging from discrimination in school to the challenges they faced in their neighborhoods. David listened attentively, taking notes and prompting deeper conversations with thoughtful questions. By the end of the session, the atmosphere had transformed. What began as a room filled with uncertainty had turned into a vibrant dialogue, where students expressed hope and determination to be part of the change they wish to see. "We should start a club that focuses on community service and awareness," one student suggested, her enthusiasm infectious. David's heart swelled with pride. "That's an excellent idea. Let's brainstorm how we can support that initiative together." The workshop concluded with students feeling empowered and connected, and David left the school with a renewed sense of purpose. He knew that their voices mattered, and he was committed to amplifying them. In the following weeks, similar workshops took place, each time building upon the last. David saw the community begin to coalesce around their shared goals. He felt a sense of urgency to keep the conversations alive and to ensure that their ideas translated into action. One afternoon, while working late in his office, David received a call from the mayor's office. "David, we'd like to discuss your upcoming initiatives," the mayor said, his tone polite but firm. "Of course, I'd be happy to meet," David replied, sensing the weight of the conversation. When they met, the mayor expressed his concerns about the growing protests and the demand for accountability from the local government. "While we appreciate your efforts, we want to ensure that you're not stepping on our toes," he stated cautiously. I understand your concerns, and I want to clarify that my goal is to support our community's needs, David explained. I believe that by collaborating, we can strengthen our diplomatic ties and create meaningful change. The mayor sighed, his expression softening. I appreciate your dedication. However, we need to be careful about how we proceed. The last thing we want is to escalate tensions further. David nodded, recognizing the importance of balancing his role as an ambassador with the sensitivities of local politics. Absolutely. I'm committed to working alongside you to ensure our initiatives are constructive and beneficial for everyone. After their meeting, David left with a renewed sense of determination. He knew the road ahead would be challenging, but he was resolved to navigate it with diplomacy and respect. The following week, David arranged a community forum where citizens could discuss their concerns and share ideas. He invited local leaders, businesses, and residents, emphasizing the importance of collaboration. As the forum began, David felt a mix of excitement and apprehension. He wanted to create a space where everyone felt heard, and he knew that fostering open dialogue would be key to achieving that goal. Thank you all for being here, he said, standing at the front of the room. This is a space for us to come together, share our experiences, and work collaboratively toward solutions that benefit our community. As discussions unfolded, David watched as individuals from different backgrounds shared their stories. The energy in the room was palpable, and it became clear that this was a crucial moment for building bridges between the U.S. and the local community. David felt hopeful as he saw people begin to connect, recognizing that their shared experiences could pave the way for understanding and change. It was an affirmation of his belief that even in the face of challenges, the power of community could overcome obstacles. With each workshop, forum, and dialogue, David's resolve deepened. He was committed to fostering a relationship built on trust and respect. He knew the journey would not be easy, but as he looked around at the engaged faces in the room, he felt confident that together, they could make a difference. As David immersed himself in his new initiatives, he began to notice subtle changes in the community's atmosphere. While many residents engaged positively with the workshops, tension still lingered, particularly among those who felt marginalized by the government's previous actions. The mayor's office, too, seemed uneasy, with local leaders expressing concerns about the potential backlash from David's outreach efforts. One afternoon, David received a call from Maria, who had been instrumental in organizing the workshops. "David, we need to talk. There's been some unrest at the community center," she said, her tone grave. "What's happening?" David asked, a knot forming in his stomach. "There's a group of residents planning a protest against the mayor's office. They feel that the workshops aren't enough and that the government isn't doing enough to address their concerns," she explained. David sighed, realizing that despite their efforts, some residents remain frustrated. "I'll head over there right now," he replied, determination creeping into his voice. When he arrived at the community center, David found a crowd gathered, chanting slogans demanding accountability. He could see the energy was palpable, but the atmosphere felt tense and charged. As he approached the group, he noticed a familiar face in the crowd. Liam, one of the young activists who had attended his workshops. "Liam," David called out, making his way through the throng. When Liam turned and saw David, his expression softened, but the fire in his eyes remained. "Ambassador David, this isn't just about the workshops anymore. We need real change, not just words," Liam shouted, his voice resonating with the crowd. "I understand, Liam. That's why I'm here," David replied, raising his hands to calm the crowd. "Let's talk about what you feel is missing. I want to hear your concerns." Slowly, the crowd began to quiet down, curiosity piqued by David's willingness to engage. He stepped onto a makeshift platform, addressing the group with sincerity. "I'm here to listen and to work with you. What specific actions do you feel need to be taken?" The crowd responded with a mixture of passionate voices, each expressing their frustrations, concerns about police accountability, the need for better education funding, and equitable access to resources. David listened intently, noting each issue raised, determined to find ways to address their concerns. After the crowd had shared their thoughts, David looked around at the faces before him. "I hear you. These are valid concerns, and I want you to know that I'm committed to amplifying your voices within the government. Let's set up a forum where we can meet with local officials to discuss these issues directly." Liam stepped forward, skepticism evident on his face. "Will they actually listen? We've tried before, and nothing has changed." "I believe they will," David replied earnestly. "I'll personally ensure that your voices are heard. Change doesn't happen overnight, but it starts with conversations like these." The crowd began to murmur among themselves, and David could sense a shift. While not everyone was fully convinced, many seemed willing to give this new approach a chance. After the protest, David took time to meet with community leaders and local officials to discuss the unrest. He organized a meeting at the embassy, inviting representatives from the mayor's office, law enforcement, and various community organizations. "Thank you all for coming," David began, his tone serious yet hopeful. "We need to address the growing frustrations in our community. The workshops and dialogues have sparked important conversations, but it's clear that we need more direct action." The mayor nodded, looking pensive. "I appreciate your efforts, David, but we have to be careful. Some residents have lost faith in the government's ability to respond to their needs." David agreed, knowing that rebuilding trust would be a long process. "That's why we need to involve them in the decision-making process. If they feel heard, they will be more likely to engage positively with the government." Local law enforcement representatives shared their concerns about community tensions and the need for better relationships with residents. "We want to improve our image, but we need community support to do that," one officer said. David seized the opportunity. "Then let's create a community advisory board consisting of residents, community leaders, and police representatives. This board can help bridge the gap and foster understanding." The officials exchanged glances, some appearing uncertain while others nodded in agreement. After much discussion, they began to see the potential for this collaborative approach. Over the next few weeks, David worked tirelessly to bring the advisory board to life. He reached out to community members, inviting them to be part of this new initiative. The response was overwhelmingly positive, as people were eager to have a seat at the table. Finally, the day arrived for the first meeting of the Community Advisory Board. David felt a mix of excitement and nervousness as he prepared to address the diverse group gathered in the embassy's conference room. As he welcomed everyone, he noticed a mix of familiar and new faces. "Thank you all for being here. Today marks an important step toward building trust and understanding between our community and the government." The discussions that followed were passionate and at times heated, but David encouraged open dialogue. Residents shared their concerns, while officials provided insight into the challenges they faced. As the meeting progressed, David was encouraged to see the willingness of both sides to engage in meaningful conversations. There was a growing realization that change required commitment from everyone involved. At the end of the meeting, one community leader stood up. "I appreciate this opportunity to talk openly. It's refreshing to know that we have a platform to voice our concerns." David felt a surge of hope. This is just the beginning. Together, we can create actionable solutions that benefit our community. As the participants left, David was filled with a sense of accomplishment. The advisory board had sparked a new era of collaboration, and he was hopeful for the future. However, he knew that the path ahead would still be filled with challenges. In the days that followed, the advisory board continued to meet, tackling various issues, from public safety to education. David was determined to keep the lines of communication open, ensuring that everyone felt valued and heard. But just as things began to stabilize, David received unsettling news. A social media post had gone viral, portraying him as out of touch and dismissive of community concerns. Accusations flew that he was simply trying to pacify the situation without genuine commitment. Feeling the weight of the accusations, David knew he had to act quickly. He called for an emergency meeting with the advisory board to address the growing unrest fueled by the online narrative. The emergency meeting was tense as David entered the conference room filled with community leaders, police representatives, and local officials. The atmosphere was thick with uncertainty, a palpable sense of urgency as they gathered to address the backlash from the viral post. David took a deep breath, knowing that open communication would be crucial in restoring trust. "Thank you all for coming on such short notice," David began, scanning the room. "I know there are concerns about the recent social media posts that are painting a negative picture of our efforts. I want to address these head-on." Liam, one of the young activists from the community, was the first to speak up. "David, people are feeling betrayed. They think you're not genuinely committed to our cause, that you're just trying to save face." David nodded, acknowledging the gravity of the accusation. "I understand why people feel that way. Social media can distort our intentions, making it seem like we're not listening or acting. But I assure you, my commitment to this community is real, and I want to hear your thoughts on how we can improve." As the conversation unfolded, different voices filled the room, some skeptical, others hopeful. Local officials expressed their worries about how the negative publicity could hinder their efforts. The police representatives spoke about the need to rebuild trust with the community, acknowledging their own failures in the past. "We need to show the community that we are willing to change," one officer said earnestly. "But it starts with accountability. We need to own our mistakes and work together." David seized the moment. "I propose we hold a town hall meeting, an open forum where community members can voice their concerns directly to us. We need to be transparent about our intentions and actions moving forward. It's crucial for rebuilding trust." Liam raised an eyebrow. "Will the officials actually listen? We've had town halls before, and they often feel like a waste of time." "I understand the skepticism, Liam, but this time we need to make it different. We'll invite local media to cover it, and I'll ensure everyone knows that this isn't just another meeting. It's a commitment to change," David insisted, his voice firm. The room fell silent for a moment, weighing David's proposal. Finally, Maria spoke up. "I think it's a great idea. We need a platform to air our grievances and hold everyone accountable." With a nod of agreement from others in the room, David felt a sense of relief wash over him. The first step toward mending the rift had been taken. Over the next few days, David and the advisory board worked tirelessly to prepare for the town hall meeting. They spread the word through flyers, social media, and community organizations, urging residents to come and share their thoughts. As the date approached, David felt the weight of expectations on his shoulders. On the evening of the town hall, the community center buzzed with energy. Residents filled the seats, some clutching signs demanding justice and accountability. David stood at the front, flanked by local officials and police representatives, ready to face the crowd. "Thank you all for being here tonight," he began, his voice steady despite the palpable tension in the air. "Tonight, we're here to listen, to hear your voices and understand your concerns. This is your opportunity to speak directly to us." As he spoke, David could see a mix of hope and skepticism in the audience. He continued, "I want you to know that your feelings are valid, and we are committed to finding solutions together." The first few residents stepped up to the microphone, sharing their stories and frustrations. Some spoke about personal encounters with law enforcement that had left them feeling disrespected and marginalized. Others highlighted systemic issues they believed needed urgent attention. "Nothing ever changes," one woman exclaimed, her voice breaking with emotion. "We've been promised change before and nothing happens." David listened intently, his heart heavy with their pain. "I hear you, and I know it's frustrating. But tonight, I want us to focus on solutions. What can we do to move forward?" As the evening progressed, the atmosphere gradually shifted from frustration to collaboration. Community members began to propose actionable ideas, Initiatives for youth programs, community policing efforts, and workshops focus on fostering understanding between law enforcement and residents. With each suggestion, David felt a sense of hope blossoming within him. They were no longer just expressing anger. They were seeking solutions. By the end of the night, David looked out at the crowd, grateful for their willingness to engage. Before closing the meeting, David addressed the crowd one last time. "Thank you for your honesty tonight. We have a lot to work on, but I believe we can create meaningful change together. I'm committed to taking your concerns back to the government, and I hope to establish a follow-up meeting where we can discuss progress." As the crowd dispersed, David felt a surge of optimism. The town hall had been a success, but he knew the real work was just beginning. He made a promise to himself to follow through on the commitments made that night. In the days that followed, David began organizing a series of workshops focused on the issues raised during the town hall. He reached out to experts in community engagement, law enforcement practices, and social justice advocacy to facilitate these sessions. The response was overwhelming, with community members eager to participate and learn. But just when things seemed to be settling, David received an unexpected call from the mayor's office. The mayor wanted to meet with him urgently. When David arrived at the mayor's office, he found the mayor pacing nervously. "David, we've been getting pressure from higher-ups. They're not pleased with how things are unfolding in the community, especially after the town hall. They're worried about potential fallout." David furrowed his brow. "What kind of fallout?" "The mayor's office is being scrutinized. They believe you're stirring the pot and that the unrest could lead to larger issues. They're considering rolling back some of the commitments made," the mayor explained, frustration evident in his voice. David felt a surge of anger. "But we're finally making progress. This is about the community's needs, not politics." The mayor sighed, rubbing his temples. "I understand, but you need to navigate this carefully. If the administration feels threatened, they might pull support from the initiatives you're working on." David nodded, knowing that he had to tread carefully. "I won't let them derail our progress. I'll continue to advocate for the community, but we need to find a way to keep them on board." After their meeting, David left the mayor's office with a heavy heart, acutely aware of the delicate balance he had to maintain. He knew he had to find a way to keep pushing for change, while ensuring the administration didn't feel threatened by his efforts. As the sun set that evening, David stood by his window, gazing out at the city. He felt a sense of determination wash over him. He would not back down. The voices of the community deserved to be heard, and he would fight for their rights, no matter the obstacles ahead. The morning of the follow-up meeting arrived, and David felt a mixture of excitement and anxiety. The community had been eagerly awaiting updates on the initiatives discussed during the town hall, and he wanted to ensure he delivered on his promises. This was not just about him. It was about the community's hope for real change. As he entered the community center, David was met with a warm welcome. People were chatting amongst themselves, their expressions a blend of anticipation and optimism. He took a moment to absorb the atmosphere, feeling a renewed sense of purpose. "Thank you all for coming back today," David began, standing at the front of the room. "I'm here to provide updates on our discussions and hear your thoughts on how we can move forward together." The crowd applauded, and David could see familiar faces from the town hall, some still holding on to the signs that had become symbols of their collective struggle. It was a reminder that their voices mattered. "Since our last meeting, I've been working closely with community leaders, local officials, and police representatives to establish a series of workshops focused on community engagement and law enforcement training," David continued. "These workshops will aim to foster better communication and understanding between residents and the police." As he spoke, he noticed the crowd's enthusiasm growing. Maria stood up and asked, "When do the workshops start?" "People are eager to get involved." David smiled, encouraged by the engagement. "The first workshop is scheduled for next week. We'll have experts leading discussions on community policing and de-escalation tactics, and I encourage everyone to participate. This is a chance to learn and share your experiences." As he outlined the details, the audience seemed increasingly invested. The realization that their voices were being acknowledged sparked a newfound hope in the room. It was clear that the community was ready to engage and take ownership of the initiatives being put in place. After David finished sharing the updates, he opened the floor for questions. I want to hear your thoughts. What other issues do you think we should address? One resident, an older gentleman named Mr. Thompson, spoke up. David, what about addressing racial profiling? That's something many of us experience, and it needs to be part of these discussions. David nodded, appreciating the input. Absolutely. Racial profiling is a significant concern, and it will be included in our workshops. We want to create a safe space where you can share your stories, and we can learn how to improve. The meeting continued with robust discussions, and by the end, David could feel the energy in the room shifting. The community was becoming more cohesive, united by the common goal of fostering change. He was proud to see people willing to take action, and he knew they were on the right path. After the meeting concluded, David lingered to speak with several attendees. He wanted to connect personally and understand their perspectives more deeply. Maria approached him, her enthusiasm infectious. David, I'm so glad you're leading this effort. It feels different this time, like we're finally being heard. Thank you, Maria. That means a lot to me. I'm committed to making sure we continue this momentum. We can't let it fizzle out, David replied, his determination unwavering. As the weeks went by, the workshops began and attendance soared. David found himself immersed in discussions about systemic racism, community safety, and police accountability. Each session opened up avenues for dialogue that had long been neglected. Local officials began to notice the shift in public sentiment. Support for David grew within the community, and even the mayor seemed more inclined to support the initiatives, recognizing the growing momentum. The balance David had worked so hard to maintain was finally tipping in favor of progress. However, amid the success, there were challenges. A few city officials remained skeptical, worrying about the potential backlash from higher-ups. David understood their concerns, but remained resolute. We're on the right side of history. We have to keep pushing for change, even if it's uncomfortable. One evening, after a particularly impactful workshop, David received an unexpected call from the mayor. David, we need to talk, the mayor said, his tone serious. Is everything okay? David asked, bracing himself for bad news. Things have escalated in the city. Some community members are demanding more immediate action, and there's pressure from above to curb the workshops. I need to know how we can manage this situation without losing everything you've built, the mayor explained. David felt a knot tighten in his stomach. I understand the pressure, but we can't back down now. We need to show the community that we're committed to change, not just talking about it. Can we arrange a public statement together? After a moment of silence, the mayor agreed. Let's schedule a press conference. We can present the initiatives and reassure the community that we're in this together. The following week, David stood beside the mayor at the podium in front of a crowd of eager reporters and community members. He felt a wave of anxiety, knowing that this moment was crucial for maintaining the trust they had built. Today, we're here to reaffirm our commitment to fostering a safe and inclusive community for all, the mayor began. We understand the concerns about systemic issues within our city, and we are taking actionable steps to address them. David stepped up next. I want to emphasize that our workshops are just the beginning. We're listening to your concerns, and we will continue to advocate for meaningful change in our community. Together, we can build a stronger future. The press conference was met with mixed reactions, but the public support for David's initiatives continued to grow. More residents became involved, and the workshops flourished into a larger movement, drawing attention from neighboring communities. As David looked out at the crowd, he felt a sense of fulfillment wash over him. He had turned a challenging situation into an opportunity for growth, uniting people from diverse backgrounds in pursuit of justice and equality. Months later, as the sun began to set, David stood outside the community center, reflecting on the journey. The streets were bustling with life, filled with laughter and conversation. A feeling of hope lingered in the air, and David knew they were making progress. Though challenges still lay ahead, David felt ready to face them. He had learned that the strength of the community lay in their voices and their resilience. They had come together to demand change, and David was proud to stand alongside them as an ally. In that moment, he understood that he was no longer just the underestimated ambassador. He was a symbol of hope and empowerment for the community he had grown to love.